Hello there, Dave here again. Getting back into the book of Genesis. I think we left off at chapter 10 or 11 actually, about the Tower of Babel being created. It's interesting that God told man to spread throughout the earth and subdue it. And the first thought of man is, we cannot allow that to happen. So we're going to build this giant tower and start worshiping the stars and worshiping the creation rather than the creator. And at some point they just got very off topic. They're off of the belief system where they should have been. And there's a whole lot there. And the line going all the way to Abram, not yet Abraham, at the end of that chapter. And then chapter 12 is the famous call, God's call to Abram. You could learn a lot about that actually from Stephen when he's right before he's getting martyred in the book of Acts, as he mentions that God had called Abram before Abram actually left, and Abram just went upstream a little bit until his father died. Then he went and fulfilled the promise to God, fulfilled the call of God on his heart. Second half of chapter 12 is a little bit of unbelief coming into Abram being tested by the famine, and then of course lying about his sister, or it was not his sister, his wife, Sarai, saying she was a sister, and she was technically a half-sister, but still, it's kind of not unusual in that time period for you to marry family like that. But anyway, the next chapter, chapter 13, God promising Abram the land again. Abram and Lot separate. Now, I don't think that God told Abram to take Lot in the first place, but Abram did, causing a whole lot of problems down the road. Anyway, but God confirms his promise to Abram. Lot separates from him, goes to Sodom and Gomorrah and all that land, and Abram ends up with the promised land that God promises, all the land, and even more. God promised Abram more land than Israel even now is currently inhabiting. It's pretty interesting. So we'll see what happens when the Lord returns and takes over the land of Israel and fulfills the promises to Abraham. At any rate, chapter 14, Abram rescuing Lot, meeting Melchizedek, and that's a whole big thing about tithing to Melchizedek and how Jesus is in the line of Melchizedek. It's pretty interesting. Chapter 15, God confirming the covenant to Abraham, changing his name to Abraham, comes later. I just keep calling him Abraham. You know who I mean. Sarai becomes Sarah, which is fascinating because the breath of God is the only thing missing from those two names. Abram has the breath of God added to it to become Abraham, and Sarai has the added to her to become Sarah. So it's pretty interesting that the breath of God breathed into those two. Sort of like God saying, okay, I'm starting with you two. It's like originally it was Adam and Eve, now, and then it was Noah, now it's Abram. God is specifically calling the people, Abram and Sarai, who before that may very well have been idol worshiping and worshiping false gods, but then being called by the real God, the true God, the one that we know. Chapter 16, Hagar and the birth of Ishmael. Of course, that's all Sarai trying to have a baby and figuring, well, I'll just give Hagar to you and all of that. So didn't end up turning out very well for anybody, even now. Chapter 17, God confirms the covenant again. This is a lot of confirming the covenant, you know. Here's a sign, and then the promise of a son to both Abraham and Sarah. You will have a son. The promise of Isaac confirmed again in chapter 18 with the visitors. Chapter 19, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Chapter 20, Abraham lying about Sarah again. Chapter 21, the birth of the promised son, Isaac, the one whose name means laughter. It's pretty fascinating because, you know, it's like, even now the Lord has promised me a son in my old age. Both of them were very old, both of them beyond childbearing, and the word of God says that he enabled both of them to be able to bear Isaac. So that's pretty cool. We'll get into chapter 22 in the next video. God bless, my friends. Thank you for listening.